Well, good morning and welcome to Body of Work. This is a series of conversations with disabled artists and designers. I'm your host, Wolfe-Erikson, and today we are joined by Batoul Ballout. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Correct, yeah, that's good.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing. So, an artist originally from Beirut, Lebanon. Her work revolves around ideas of trauma, belonging, identity, and resistance. Ballout explores what it means to be Muslim, female, a war victim, and an immigrant in an alienating world. Through her work, she reflects on life experiences, using them as a vehicle for storytelling. That's amazing. Did I
Thank you.
miss anything? How are you? Good
No, you
morning.
did not. That was perfect. Thank you
Cool.
for that introduction. Yeah, so I've been like painting for around maybe 6 years, and I started mostly with self-portraiture to kind of deal with immigrating here and feeling a bit different, even though I like the area I moved into with my family is like there's a majority of like Arab American population. So it was kind of like, yes, I feel like I identify with them to a certain extent, but there's still this disconnect because obviously I immigrated here at age 20. So I grew up most of my life, in Lebanon. So there's like that weird space,
Yeah.
that I don't know even how to identify. But yeah, do you have specific questions? If you want to like
I
section
do.
it off, that would be perfect.
Yeah, totally. And identity is a big one of the questions that I want to touch on. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah,
But you immigrated to Michigan?
yeah, to
Okay.
Dearborn specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you were 20, that's very interesting because when you live your entire life and you assume this identity that's like very solid, to
Mhm.
be in Beirut for so long and then to move to this place it's like entirely different. Did you notice your art change when you moved?
Well, yeah, I didn't really practice,
Mm,
art making. I mean, craft making, which I consider, obviously part of art, but it wasn't like I never imagined to be an artist kind of. So I wasn't even
mm-hmm.
focused on that. I went into architecture and childhood education for a
Okay.
while. And I was like, no, this is not for me. Architecture was
Mm-hmm.
too much rule, like too many rules. Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew that already, but I was just not having it. So I switched a lot of majors, and I think over the years being here, definitely it shifted because when I even started making work and it was just self-portraiture, it was heavily based on identity and immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at it now, I've kind of moved a bit away from that to include more about trauma and processing instead of just having it about identity politics.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that I mean, even as we grow, obviously our identities change as well. And even in Lebanon, I never felt like I had an identity
Mm-hmm.
that tied into just Lebanon. I always felt like I wouldn't say different, but like there was no true belonging, kind of. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. I relate to that a lot and just like in that like kind of sort of displacement of sense of belonging, you sort of, at least in my experience, like finding it like within my work or like sort of if I can't like find it, like create it or like, sort of express that sort of, lack of belonging. It's very,
Mhm.
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So my next question is more specific to the medium. It seems that you're an acrylic painter mostly.
Oil.
Oil. Okay,
Yeah.
so oil paints. What connects you to that medium? I can also share some of the work that you do, and then that way we can sort of like maybe walk through a piece.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, oils. I honestly, that's how I started painting.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really experiment much with acrylics, or I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've experimented with watercolors and gouache, but because I started with oils and the the nature of oil paint. It doesn't really dry fast. And I like that. It kind of, you can live with a piece for months sometimes, you know? Yeah, and acrylics would just, I tried and I was like, you know, different things could work with acrylics, but the things I'm painting most of the time, you know, cannot really.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, but I personally would rather use oils.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Something that I've noticed in your work is some things like this where it's not like a conventional frame. It's not square, it breaks boundaries. This almost looks like a found object. Is that correct?
It's correct. Yeah, these are like pieces of drywall from my parents' house.
Okay.
My dad knocked down a wall, you know, so I was like, actually save the pieces, you know, I want to use them.
Yeah.
And I'm very like attracted to that material, like the wire, it's like it's an old house, so it has like the drywall is different. It has like concrete and it's like plaster building. You know, not just one layer of one thing, just plaster and paper and whatever. But yeah, and especially this piece, I was like thinking about what can go on these two drywall pieces, and I saw a photo shoot of one like she's an influencer. I don't know if she would like that title, but her name is Hanan al-Badri, I think. And I loved, she had a photo show and I loved that picture. That's her on the right side with the black and blue. And I was like, how can I bring that into my work in a way where, you know, it still is in the same realm of everything that I talk about. And she's Syrian, lives in Paris. So kind of like similar, you know, with war, you know, dealing with war and immigration, living somewhere else. I kind of wanted to like also paint, you know, like a picture of myself, kind of like a self-portrait, and having us kind of like looking at each other as like different people, kind of different worlds, but still relating, you know, to each other on a, you know, some level. And the drywall pieces being broken down, kind of.
Yeah, and like sharing the material, right?
Exactly.
Like the
Yeah.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I love that. Are there any other pieces that you'd like to specifically call out to?
Not specifically, but all of them kind of like share this kind of exploration and challenging of like lived experiences and how they intersect with global politics, but at the same time, how to navigate those things while dealing with trauma and stress and PTSD and panic disorder, and how like that kind of hinders living, you know, daily living sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just like kind of, they all lay in a realm of just how like the trauma kind of lives in the body and the mind, and how like it also affects memory, how like dissociation, like so many things. It's like all packed, but it's all like me trying to find it within myself and kind of research more about it. Yeah, and I used to like plan a lot before I painted. Now it's just a bit more intuitive and like letting my subconscious come out.
Cool.
Yeah, this piece specifically, I wanted to kind of bring in like Beirut or like different glimpses of things that I've kind of lived around into one wall. And I actually had music playing through the wall. And it was Arabic music, like specific, you know, revolutionary, or I wouldn't say, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a weird genre of music. Not weird, but it's like very like, and like tying into resistance and that. So it was really emotional, and I really had a lot of fun making it because I've never like, you know, made a wall, built a wall kind of, and just
Wow.
graffitied it, you know,
Yeah.
painted on it. And yeah, it was really liberating, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And what a cool process,
Mhm.
to tap into that resistance and your own identity and a brick in the wall of like the resistance
Yep.
that you can feel like through the community, and to feel a part of that, and this sort of like symbolism of a wall is quite stunning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Super, super cool.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing,
Yeah.
and I've got some other questions for you. So could you share a bit about your disability, how you identify with it, and how creating art helps you to process it?
Yeah. So my disability isn't like visible because it's more of a mental disability.
Hmm.
So it's not perceived by people. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of other disabilities are not either. And I, the art making is me processing it kind of, other than therapy and all of, the things we have to work on. But making the art sometimes kind of helps things resurface and me to identify them and kind of process them is like what I'm latching on to. Because I mean, I don't know what's happening in my subconscious, unless it comes
Yeah.
out on, a canvas or something. And it is the kind of like the easiest way for me to deal with my disability, because I like deal with panic disorder on, daily basis kind of. And it's not like I never know when it's gonna happen, kind of. So I'm always like
Hmm.
fearful of it happening. And it's like really severe that it lands me in a hospital. It's
Hmm.
not like just, I mean, I deal with like, short ones and simple ones, but when it gets to like a point of severeness, I'm like, well, it's happening
Yeah.
again. And the hospital, is
Yeah.
my only option kind of, because it's so severe, like nothing stops it
Mm-hmm.
except for like a needle, like just
Mm-hmm.
medicine injected into the system.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's what I deal with. And it's depends on what I'm going through, that changes a lot. But I've been dealing with it for more than 10 years. So, therapy, medication, like it's all like a
Mm-hmm.
cycle. But
Yeah.
I've like went through a lot of it. And now I'm just like, I'll just do everything together, like
Yeah.
meditation, therapy, whatever
Yeah.
can make it a bit less severe, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered the full question.
No, totally. I just
Yeah.
think it's so funny to think of like a panic attack as like something that's like short and simple. Like you
Yeah.
have like like that's like no version of a panic attack is like short or simple. Like it's
Yeah,
too
I
much
have
for too long.
categories.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, and I relate in many ways, but it's one of the ways that I like found art, because it's a flow state that I could kind of get into, being able to like bring out that subconscious that is so locked in place as a result of trauma. Could you speak a little bit more about how that like that space of your subconscious and how it relates to your rehabilitation of panic disorder, or the role that it plays?
I think mostly it does. Sometimes I find myself in a spot where it feels like a bit much. So
Mm.
I, take a step back, I put the work away, and I just
Mm.
revisit it later. Because I mean, I do believe that also healing, you have to go through a bit of pain to get there. I know. I know it's like a lot of work, and we're all like,
Yeah.
trying to process it. But it just depends on the piece, depends on what comes out. And if it's severe, yeah, I need to take a step back. And
Mm.
sometimes I don't even share those works. I think they're just part of healing instead of me as an
Mm.
artist to the public. Yeah,
I
yeah.
so appreciate that for so many reasons, but like the ability to step away from your work, I don't know, what I sort of hear is like not placing too much expectation on your work.
Yeah.
You know, like I've been in places where I feel like I need to do this work in order to, like, you know, move through these emotions, but in a way the work becomes heavy, or like it
Yeah.
like takes on an energy that I like didn't intend for it to, didn't want for it to.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
because you don't want to reach a place where it's just a breaking point for you either,
totally,
like a negative
absolutely.
breaking point.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, wow. So in your work, identity plays a big role. You carry a lot of identities within yourself. Could you talk a little bit about the multiple identities you hold and how their intersectionality affects your work, and maybe like what identity or area of exploration you're focusing most on right now?
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, the piece behind me is,
Hmm.
multiple self-portraits and
Yeah.
kind of multiple identities. And it's, I mean, I believe every person has those identities to kind of exist in the world, because we don't, exist in a vacuum. And I read a lot of there's a French philosopher, his work, like his name is Jean-Luc Nancy, and he talks about being singular plural, and it's kind of like it's really dense. So I don't know even like how to like specifically explain it, but it talks about how each person is singular and plural, because we can't exist as just me. We exist in like in a community with people, um in a society kind of, and
Hmm.
there's like there's like no being without the other, if that makes sense. That's like the only way I can describe it um
Totally. We don't
now,
exist in a
but
vacuum.
exactly. So to be also perceived, by the world or by different people in the world is like makes you act differently or makes you want to exist differently. So I think even when I was in Lebanon, I like started noticing how I act in different places and around different people. I act
Mm.
differently, and it was like more subconscious, because I wanted to protect myself kind of. And I
Mm.
wanted to build walls, or like illusions around myself. And here, like when I immigrated, it was kind of like it shifted, but then the more like politically, the world is changing, I'm like kind of taken aback, and I'm like, I don't know how to act, or I don't know how to be out in the world kind of. Yeah, it's really complicated, and I'm still like working through it, because I just want to be me kind of.
Mm.
But the different me's come out, and when I'm like processing things, it's like a lot to take in and a lot to deal with, that at one point I'm just like, I'm just gonna exist, and whoever
Mhm.
wants to deal with it,
Yeah.
deal with it. I don't know.
Yeah. The
I don't know if
different
that really
me's.
answered anything.
Totally. No, the different me's. That's such a powerful and interesting idea. And do you notice the quality with which that you paint, or the expression that you
Mhm.
paint, if you're thinking or feeling of like Batoul in Lebanon versus Batoul in Michigan? Are they different?
Definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like if I even think about myself 2 years ago, I'm like totally different. Now,
Yeah.
it's growing. Like it's part of like living life and growing, and even my skills, like painting skills, change. So, and my opinions, my taste in art, my taste in living the way I want to live my life. Like now I'm just like frantically, wanting to leave this country, trying to find
Really?
places to
Yeah.
go.
Hmm.
Kind of, yeah, I think it's part of my practice to kind of experience different places within different communities. But yeah, I'm constantly changing, and I look back at myself and I was like, wow, like what was I doing? Or kind of this was part of the process to get here. So it's not a simple, not a simple thing at all. I'm
Definitely.
not giving you any simple
Well,
answer.
that's totally fine because there are no simple answers. This
Yeah.
is like complicated, and this is why like I think it's important that these like conversations exist because it's not like quick definitions. It's not like this is the way that it is, like as people we exist like in so many different ways. Like I think you've touched on this multiple times in this talk of like we contain multitudes at all times. We carry the identity, we carry the past with us, and I think that's something that um, you exhibit in your work so beautifully, like the storage of the past and how that expresses the future or expresses the present. I also love like the fabric work that you do. I think that's like a really interesting medium choice.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and could you talk a little bit more about that actually?
for sure. Yeah, so fabric, it kind of like, because I'm a, Muslim woman that, observes the headscarf, like the hijab. Um, it is part of my identity, but also I do connect, yeah, fabric connects to touch, connects to tradition, culture, but also at the same time, it is kind of a symbol for a human being, the absence or presence, lived experiences, fabrics, wear and tear over time,
Mm,
like you can see that, and they hold such like a metaphor for me, or like poetic potentiality, kind of
mm,
like that just gives a lot to the work that sometimes I can't just express through painting.
mm,
Especially with this piece, I actually have like a wire stand-in of like a human form, a human body that kind of is sitting underneath that. And this pattern is called the kafiyya, which is specific to like the Levant region of like Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. And a lot of like people kind of wear it when they're protesting, or
mhm,
resistance fighters as well. And it just holds a lot of meaning for me and a
mhm,
lot of people like me. Um, and it's just, I wanted it to break down. And I never thought about it like that specific pattern, especially before I started painting it. And the middle section is mostly like I mean, what I'm interpreting, as a stand-in for a chain link fence, and
mhm,
then the edged patterns are like kind of birds flying, and that's what I like see kind of when I was
mm,
painting it. I mean, they're linked together, but they do. In my head, I see birds kind of, and I wanted it to be kind of like as a shroud in this piece. And those hands are just carrying like a body or a ghost, or yeah, like a metaphor of my soul, kind of. Just like, after moving here, just, it's disappearing slowly. I can't fully express myself, a
mm,
lot of things.
mm. The poetic potentiality.
Yeah, you're like, see, you were
That's
waiting.
that's beautiful. I love that. That is
Yeah,
so
sometimes I
stunning.
write good things. Yeah. I'm really
I
not
will,
great at writing, but sometimes it comes out.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, lean into that. That is so stunning. Hmm. I think this speaks so beautifully to like the past identities and like fabric as a material to like represent someone, like the past or like the potential of someone occupying that fabric is so stunning, and especially with these hands sort of like disembodying the experience is really,
Yeah.
really lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
thank you. Hands hold a lot of like meaning as well, because they're kind of first things we touch with,
Mm,
like we feel. Um and like it's kind of like where I hold my stress, and
mm,
going through like a specific experience, I like, after it happened, I was like, I looked at my hands and I was like, oh, okay, I'm still alive, kind of. So that, hands are like
Wow, this
my
like
end.
first check-in of like am I alive? Am I real?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So, oh wow.
Yeah.
So like disembodying them in a way is like,
Mhm.
hmm,
Yeah.
that's very, very interesting. Ah, that's so cool.
Mhm.
I only have one more question. So if you could see a change in your world, what would you wish to see? And I know it's a big, big question.
Yeah.
So like,
It really is.
yeah, like it's like world peace, but like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, especially, this
yeah,
time, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's a really heavy question. And I think I have two answers because, like, my world within me, I would like to cancel all my panic attacks. Just like you're
Yeah.
canceled,
Uh-huh.
just gone, just be gone. But in the world in general, kind of common grounds where people can, latch on to, or like dialogue that I don't even know how to specifically explain it, because I do want that, but I'm like also so fearful of people that are
Mm,
so aggressive about their opinions. Even though I feel passionate about politics
mhm.
and a lot of my the opinions that I hold, but I still kind of want to have that dialogue, to listen and to see what others kind of think, and because I think that might solve some problems. I don't
Mm.
even know, but yeah, just like maybe to have, like less conflict in the world. Like, I don't know what to tell. It's just really
No,
complicated.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. It's a huge question,
yeah,
and I ask it for a lot of different reasons. Because I think it like tells to like someone's experience of their hierarchy of needs, especially because this as disabled people, like what is most pressing in your world to change or
yeah,
to alter. And I think like communicating with other people
mhm,
in a way that like creates community rather than like creates conflict is so essential,
yeah,
and I think that it's still like quite a huge question mark, especially today. I think
yeah,
today so much of the discourse that happens online is so inflammatory and so
yeah,
conflict based
yeah.
and no resolution in sight.
Yep.
So, which is such a challenge, and also kind of speaks to the level of bravery of just putting yourself out there as an artist, as a person, as a person with multiple identities, as a traumatized person, as a person who carries disability, like to put ourselves out there on a public platform open to that discourse is a scary thing,
Yeah.
but in a way like you are absolutely creating that world by the work that you create and the connections that you want to see,
Yeah.
which is, thank you for your service, that's amazing.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, it's really, tough out there, because
Yeah.
I've had really good responses, within my community that's very small.
Mm,
But in the, art world, looking at it, I'm like so discouraged sometimes that I'm like,
mm,
well, no one wants to hear, I mean, a lot of the art that I'm seeing or that I'm looking at, which I, still appreciate and love, doesn't really specifically doesn't deal with the same things that I'm talking about, even though I know some artists that talk about the same things that I do exist out there, but I'm not
mhm,
like seeing them being recognized even.
mm,
That I'm like sometimes question, like, what is the art, like what does the art want,
mhm.
which is like, I don't want to change my practice to, for your
Yeah.
demand or whatever
Well, I
you
think
want me to
that
supply.
yeah,
you
I
know
think that's also like the singularity and plurality that we were talking
yeah,
about before, like
yeah,
recognizing yourself and other people's work and other people,
mhm,
like seeing your other people's story and identifying with that, but also like recognizing that it's not exactly your story, and how like Yeah, that's that intersectionality, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know it's all related.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
I have a website. It's, my name, last name, batoulballout.com. And I
Hmm.
also have an Instagram and TikTok. Um, and I mean, I don't know if you want me to say the handles, but it's kind
I
of
can
like,
put them all in the show
yeah, that would
notes.
be
So I could, yeah, I
perfect.
can,
Yeah.
they'll be like linked wherever they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah.
cool. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just thank you for giving me this opportunity. And it was a great conversation. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
love your work.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Looking forward to many more conversations, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.